That can be. Okay. Gewaltig. So sagt the Heilige Gemara weiter. Now, the only thing I forgot to mention yesterday is Rava listed 4 reasons why there would be a practical problem if we didn't know who his father was. But Rava doesn't discuss a ger and a geyeris. So Rashi tells us what the answer to that is. And it's actually a pretty fascinating Rashi. So I'm looking at Rashi. The Dima Maskal of the Rashi is v'yimter shivimter l'shuk. But if you go halfway through the Rashi, towards the end of the line, Rashi is v'gabe ger v'geyeris. By a ger and a geyeris, l'chade mehani hudikal mechish. One of the 4 problems listed by a regular person will be relevant by a ger and a geyeris. Kigoin l'shema yibem eishes ochiv me'iboy. He might end up doing yibum to the wife of his brother, who's only a brother from his mother. Why is that? Shema mubaris haisa. Maybe she was expecting when she became a geyeris, and when she gives birth to this child after she became a geyeris, svurahi sheben zayinu uvekedushin Israel. She'll think that this baby was conceived when she was already Jewish, and then then she'll have another child where she knows she was Jewish at that point. V'yisa isha, that child will marry. V'yamas b'leibanim, and will die without children. V'yibim ze'esishtoi, and he'll do yibum. The sover shagam hu nizra b'kedusha. She'll think that both brothers were conceived while she was Jewish, and therefore there's a chiv yibum here. But the chivin she said nizra shaloi b'kedusha. But since in fact the first son was conceived before she was Jewish, so we would say, so it's not really a brother because Gershon is Krakot Shalodam. But Rashi says something totally different, and all the Achronim jump on him. Ad Kedei Kach, the Maharsha says that there must have been a Talmud Toya who made a mistake in writing over Rashi's words. And this is what Rashi says. So let's assume that this is not even from her husband, because we learned a couple of weeks ago that a woman who knows she's becoming a geyeris is not going to do znus because she knows she's becoming Jewish. She doesn't want to cause problems. So that's part of the kasha they ask on Rashi. But nevertheless, so you're asking me if it's Kakot Chanel Domi, so that it shouldn't be Eshach. He's not related at all. Right? That's all part of the tumul that the Achronim tumul about this Rashi. It's a very difficult Rashi because
we're not talking about kedusha now. We're talking about
so since when he's born, that's called imoy. So that's enough to be called the shomim. It could be, but this is what they talk about. Okay, so let's see the Gemara fighter. So now we have 2 sets of reasons why it is that it's important to know who is your father. There's a book that asks, "Are you my mother?" Book, but no one ever talks about, "Are you my father?" But that's really the more important thing. So Zok to Gemara. Let's see where we're up to. Matur of Chananya. Chananya asked the question. B'chulon anikar behen. This is quoting from a brisa. B'chulon anikar behen. All of these women that the Chachamim said that they can't get married, they have to wait 3 months. Mishum takonis erba. It's because they might be over an isser arayis. Like for instance, a woman should not get remarried if for 3 months after she's a yavama, because if in fact she has a child and they do yibum, it could be an isser kares. But over here by the other additions to yibum, it's mishum takonis vlad. It's because of takonis vlad. Remember, our Mishnah first lists off you have to wait 3 months for Yavama, and then the Kol Shara Nashim. So those are kind of the Kodesh Vlad. Frank the Gemara, the Isa, Kulum Mishim the Kodesh Erva. But if you're going to learn, like Rabba just told us, that it's because it might come to a real Erva, so why does it say that they're only of the Kodesh Vlad? Mishnah would be the first shot, is the Kodesh Vlad. You need to know who the father is so that Kodesh Baruch will be Shari Shechina. But if it's because of the Erva, so then why is the Brisa making a distinction between Yavama, which could come to an Isser Erva, and the others also could come to an Isser Erva? So Kamar, you're right. That's what it means. The first half, the first case by Yibum, are so the people themselves, the mother and the father themselves, shouldn't have a problem with erva, and the additional cases are so the children shouldn't come into a scenario of erva. We're probing why is the wait 3 months. So we understand 2 months wouldn't be a good period of time to wait. Why? Because the Hainu Sveika, if the child was born 9 months after she separated from her first husband, it'll be a Savik Ibar Tisha Lakama. If the child was born 9 months full term and the father was A, Ibar Shiva Labasra, or maybe the child was born after 7 months and the father is B. But Elatamten Chodesh Echad. Why don't they just wait only 1 month? The Sinase and let her get married. And let's think about it. Vila Shiva Yolda, if she gives birth after 7 months, well, hi Bar Shiva Labasra who? It has to be Bar Shiva Labasra. You know why? Because in 8 months there wouldn't have been a birth. In those days the child couldn't survive after 8 months. Vila Tamanya Yolda, and if the baby is born 8 months later, well then hi Bar Tisha Lakamahu. It must be 9 months to the first husband. So tomorrow that wouldn't be a good way to tell. Because Inami Latamanya Yolda, if she gave birth after 8 months, you don't necessarily know that the father was A, and it's a 9-month pregnancy. Because equal remember the Basru, it could have belonged, this child could belong to the second husband. Who said she became pregnant the first day they met? Maybe she became pregnant later. So after 8 months, it's possible that this blood is the blood of the first husband, or it could be the blood of the second husband. And Rashi adds, and the other way around as well. And even if she gave birth after 7 months, you could still say it's Bartisha Lakama. It's only 8 months. Maybe she became pregnant a month before she got divorced from her first husband. So therefore, waiting 1 month wouldn't be a plan. Let her wait 2.5 months. Let her wait 10 weeks. And then get married. If she gives birth in 7 months, hi Bar Shiva Labasrahu. It has to be Bar Shiva Labasra because there's no such thing as a 9.5 month pregnancy. They never saw my wife. but it will be 9.5 months. My wife was always 2 weeks overdue. But it's not a riot because could be they got the day of conception wrong. They're guessing. But the Ila Shiva Yolda, hi Bar Shiva Labasrahu. But if they only give birth after 6.5 months, so clearly, it has to be a full-term pregnancy, and the father is A. The Ibar Basrahu, if you want to argue that maybe he's a child of B, well, Barshita Upalga, a child that's born after 6.5 months, in those days would not have survived. Inami, Leshita Upalga Yolda, no, it's still possible that it was 6.5 months and it's the child of B. Because Ikalamemar, the Basra, you could still say it belongs to B. The Amamai Sutra, even if you hold that a full-term pregnancy is full-term, it's never going to be half a month in the 9th month. A woman who doesn't carry full term, meaning the baby is born after 7 months, it doesn't have to be a full 7 months. It could be any time in the 7th month. Shenemar, like it says, and we learn miyat kufos is beis, which is two trimesters, which is 6 months, and miyut yomim is beis, so it could be 2 trimesters and 2 days would work. The Mefarshim tell us on this Gemara that the only children that are born not full term, like the miyut kufos misham, are children who are tzaddikim. I'm not sure who this is talking about being born, but we know that by Tamar, her child was born early, right? So I'm not sure this is in Shmuel Aleph. So who's it talking about? I'm not sure. But it's talking about a tzaddik. So they explain. I'm sorry? No, she was also born early because he was a tzaddik. So he explains that a person who's a balavera, he wants to be born later. He doesn't want. When does the yetzer get injected into a person when he's born? So we push it off. So that's Shmuel. So we push it off. But so very good. So it's speaking about Shmuel Hanavi. But someone who's a tzaddik could be born early because Hashem wants to let him in let him into the world quickly to do the mitzvahs, because he'll be Zgaber over his Yitzhar. So Zok to Gemara, how about the something mashu? Let her wait just a mashu, which Tosfos describes as being lavdavka mashu. For sure, you have to wait 3 days so that if there's any zera in her from the first husband, that will get ruined and dissipate. It won't cause her any problems. And Rashi says that mashu means either a week or 2. That's what Rashi says. So let her wait just a little bit of the amount. And we have another way to figure out if this child belongs to the first or to the second. Let's be boidiker. And Rashi says that a woman's breast changes when she becomes pregnant. So after 3 months, you could see a difference in her breasts. And let's be boidiker that way. And we'll know, if you're boidiker right at 3 months, then we'll know if she's pregnant. And if she's pregnant right at 3 months, then you're boidiker before the 3 months, right? And if she's pregnant, it says you're boidiker right before the 3 months. I'm sorry? Right. So if right away if you see there that there's a simonim of pregnancy, it must be from her husband. If it doesn't come till a couple of days later, then it'll be from the Baal, from the second Baal. Reb Safra, ein boikin as an asuis shloiskanu al balein. When you put a woman through such an invasive type of inspection, it makes her nizgana to her Baal. So therefore, we wouldn't do something like that to her. But there's another way to test. A woman who's pregnant walks with much heavier steps. She's not so light on her feet. So you could even check the soil that she walked on to see how depressed it became. And I guess she'll make deeper footprints in soil if she's pregnant, because of the way she walks, she puts more pressure on the ground. And that's not an invasive type of test. A woman is always going to try to make it look like she's not pregnant from her first husband, rather she's pregnant from her second husband. So she could purposely modify her gait to tread more lightly. Why? Because she wants her second husband to believe that the child is from him. Why? The fact that she's married to B now. So she wants her child to get Yerusha from her second husband. She wants him to be part of the family. So she'll try to manipulate it to make it look that way. Okay, so now we understand why you have to wait 3 months. But what if in the middle of the 3 months we get verification that she's pregnant? So now we've already determined that this child belonged to A. Why don't we let her get married then? Because the Hafchad is taken care of. We already know it's the first husband. Right? One may not marry a woman who's pregnant from someone else. Right? The imnasa, and if he did, Yosy, he has to divorce her. We learned this a couple of months ago. I think it says. And he's never allowed to take her back because it's like a knas. He should never have married this woman. Why? Gzeira Shema Tasa Ubrasanda. We're afraid that if she becomes pregnant again, the second pregnancy is going to crush the first pregnancy. A woman can't become pregnant once she's pregnant already. So the Mefarshim say, although she cannot become pregnant with a viable child, it is possible for some type of growing to happen, even though it won't be a viable child, but that whatever grows in there will be enough to damage the first fetus. If that's the concern, that the second pregnancy will hurt the first pregnancy, well, so why isn't there a rule that when someone is pregnant, he's not allowed to be with his wife for 2 years? It should be the same reason. What's the difference if the child belongs to someone else's husband or if the child belongs to him? According to the Mandam who held that if you're married to a woman and you're not supposed to be boiler, you're allowed to use contraception, then you use contraception. You're not allowed to use contraception, but the Rebbeinu will have achmonis that there shouldn't be any damage, then Mishamayim Yerachamu. So Dr. Moore, well, why don't you say the same thing if it's someone else's child? So Dr. Moore, Ella, it must be that if it's his own child, the chasa. Oh, not if it's own child. The chasa means it'll crush the baby. Meaning the tashmish itself, the disha, the tashmish itself will cause an injury to the fetus. So if it's his child as well, it should be the same problem. So how do we let someone have tashmish when his wife is expecting? So tomorrow, the day chayis iluya, his own child, if his wife is expecting his own child, naturally he's going to be much more gentle. But if it's someone else's child, he won't be so gentle and he'll hurt the child. What are you talking about? We're not talking about someone who wants to kill somebody. So even though until a baby's full term and born, he wouldn't be chayiv misa for killing a fetus, it's not called rizicha, but still, no normal person is going to do something to hurt another child. Ella, you have to say that the reason is because Stam meuberes lemanika kaim. A normal meuberes, what's going to happen when the child is born? She's going to start nursing. And that's where the issue is. And the problem is, we're afraid she'll become pregnant from the second husband when she's going to have to nurse, and that'll stop her milk from flowing, and now she's not going to have a way to feed and nourish her child. The katlale, and the child is going to die. So with his own child, you'd have the same problem. So he will make sure, the father will make sure to give her a good supply of eggs and milk, and they'll find some other way with which to feed the baby. If it's her child as well, they can feed the baby otherwise without nursing. Her husband will say, I'm not supporting your child. He's not my child. I don't care about him. So let her be able to be tevei the yarshim, to take part of the Yerusha on behalf of this child, who's a child of the first husband, and they should have to give him money so that he'll be able to sustain himself. She's embarrassed to go to Bezdin and to call her first husband to the Torah. It's a very uncomfortable thing, and therefore, so it's interesting that the Gemara doesn't say Vilit Pe'ina to her first husband. It says let her mon the Yorshim of her first husband. What if? So in other words, the Gemara is asking this kasha based on if her first husband died. What if she was divorced? So the first day, if she divorced her first husband, she'll have no problem dragging him to court. If she lost her first husband, she'll feel uncomfortable dragging the Yisraelim to court. But her husband, she'll put him through a ringer. Okay, so the Gemara back there. The Gemara asked, it's repetitive because Hainu Basulas, Hainu Arusais. And the Rusa is a Basula. So why does the Mishnah mention Arusais as well as Basulas if they both essentially mean the same thing? Hainu Bulas, Hainu the Sulas. And the Bulas and the Sula. This is what the Mishnah means to say. Achas Basulas, Achas Basul Ulais. Shenis Armalois, Shenis Gashu, they either became Almanas or they were divorced. Beimin Erison, which would have made him a Basula. Beimin Anasuin, which would have left him a Bula. One day, Rabbi Lazar did not come to the Beis Medrash, but he wanted to know what was the discussion in the Beis Medrash. So Rabasi, he bumped into Rabasi. Amalei, he told him, "My Omer Rabbanan b'Vei Midrasha." What was the discussion today in the Beis Medrash? Amalei. So Rabasi told him, "Hachi Omer Rabbi Yochanan." This is what Rabbi Yochanan said. Halacha Rabbi Yosy. The halacha is like Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Yosy in our Mishnah says that any of these women are allowed to get remarried if there's not a problem of a pregnancy. So if it was an almana min erison, she can do the suin. If she was an almana min suin, she can do erison. Except an almana, a grusha could, but an almana can't because of avelos. An almana has to wait 3 months. Zok to Gemara mechlal the yichida palagale. If Rabbi Yochanan is passing like Rabbi Yosy, we know that Yachid v'Rabim halacha karabim. So if Rabbi Yochanan is passing like Rabbi Yosy, it must be that the Rabbanon of our Mishnah, the Tanakam of our Mishnah, must also be a Yachid and not a Rabbim, and that's why we can pass like Rabbi Yosy. You might ask, why didn't Rabbi Yochanan say he passes like Rabbi Yehuda? Because Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosy are both the ones who say that she can get remarried right away if there's not a chash of pregnancy. So the Mepharshim tell us that the Mishnah's Rabbi Yosy is kav v'noki. So we would rather paskin like Rabbi Yosy, like Rashi says, Rabbi Yosy in the Mukha Imai. Rabbi Yosy always has a raya to his shot. It's clear. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov is kav v'noki. So scratch what I said. The Mishnah of Rabbi Yosy is the Mukha Imai. Rabbi Yosy has, whenever he says something, he has a clear raya to himself, and that's what we like to rely on. Is that so? That it's only a Yachid arguing in Rabbi Yosy? But Tanya, we looked at the Brisa. Hareisha is a redufa. There was a woman who never hung out at home. she always hung out at her parents, which means she would not have had an intimate moment with her husband for months. Or she was in a fight with her husband, so he was in the doghouse. Beis baila, I think means the doghouse, right? Or her husband did certain mitzvahs and tovim, and he found himself in jail. So once again, and they didn't have conjugal visits in those days. Or her husband was very old, and therefore he couldn't have children. Or sick, so he couldn't have relations with her. Or she was sick and they couldn't have relations. Or after her husband died, she had a miscarriage. So these are all ways that we could know with clarity that she's not pregnant. Or we know that she physically is not capable of conceiving. Or a woman who's too old to conceive. Or a woman who's too young to conceive. Or idleness, or a woman who doesn't even have semanim. Or for any other reason, she's not able to give birth. Rashi says, La suye machmas sama oichayli, if she became sick and that caused her to become childless, or certain drugs that she took caused her to become childless, nevertheless, shricha lahamtim gimel chadashim divrei Meir. Yehuda mater le'arish v'nasamiyah. So the Gemara said, mashma, that only a yachid's arguing on Rabbi Yossi. So the Gemara in fact, yes, Vatanya was b'nichusa. You have arrived from this brisa that there's only one person arguing on Rabbi Yehuda Shita, which is Rabbi Yossi Shita, and that is Rabbi Meir. So since there's only a yachid arguing, it makes sense why we would pass on like Rabbi Yossi. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Chazor bar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said that we passed on like Rabbi Yossi. He changed his mind. He changed his mind later on. I like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yosef, if Rabbi Yochanan changed his mind from passing like Rabbi Yossi, it must be because he saw a Mishnah, the Karma Haderbe. It must be that he saw a Mishnah that was learned in the yeshiva of Kerem B'Yavna. We know Rashi tells us that in Yavna the yeshiva was rows, the boys sat on the rows, so it looks like a vineyard. So that's why they called it a Kerem, and that was a very chashuv yeshiva. And any Mishnayos that would have been mentioned over there would be ultra reliable, and that's why Rabbi Yochanan, when he heard a Mishnah quoted from Kerem B'Yavna, he said, "No, I have to pass like this Mishnah, even though I thought the paskin up until now like Rabbi Yossi." The Tanya we learned, and this was a Mishnah that was a brisa that was cited in Kerem B'Yavna. Am Rabbi Shmuel b'nei Rabbi Yechon ben Broika shemati mipicha chomim beKerem B'Yavna, that kulon, all of these women, whether they could become pregnant or not, kulon tzrichos lahamtin shloisha chadosh. So we learned yesterday. Remember, we learned yesterday that by a suffix, if you don't know which woman to do yibum to, if Eliyahu would come and say, "This is the wife of your brother, not this," then you can do yibum, and therefore you can do chalitza as well. But when it comes to waiting 3 months, there, even if Eliyahu would tell us that she's not pregnant, still we wouldn't let her get married. Why? Because our brisa cites a katana and many other women who you know for sure wouldn't be pregnant, and you still have to wait 3 months. So that's why it's called Eini Roy Yibum, and that's why you can't do chalitza either. Right? That's what we had yesterday. And the Gemara just told us that a katana has to wait 3 months. This is where I think the Gemara is quoting from. Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah or Rabbi Zrika. When you go up there to Yisrael and you're going to encounter Rabbi Vo, ask him the following question. Ramilei, this question. Me Amar Rabbi Yochanan Halacha Rabbi Yossi. Did Rabbi Yochanan say Halacha Rabbi Yossi? But Amar Rabbi Yochanan has another rule that he said. That is Halacha Stam Mishnah. Rabbi Yochanan always passes like a Stam Mishnah, because if Rabbi didn't quote it in the name of any person, Rabbi wanted to give off the impression like it's a unanimous sack, and therefore he didn't quote anybody saying it. That was Rabbi's way of indicating that that's the halacha. Utznana, we learned a Stam Mishnah. Kol hanoshim lo yinasu v'lo yisarsu ad sheyulahem shloisha chadosh achas b'sulois v'achas b'ulois. So that was the kasha that Rabbi Yirmiyah wanted to send with her B'zreika to ask Rabbi Vo. So Rabbi Zrika told him, "That's the kasha you're sending me. What do you want me to make a fool out of myself?" Anyone who asks you such a question did not watch his kemach properly. And Rashi says he wasn't careful. He didn't purify his speech. Kemach is pure, sifted, whitened flour. You clearly didn't sift and whiten your flour properly because there's something wrong with your question. And what is that? Stam v'achlach machlokes. Sure, there's a Stam Mishnah that you're quoting, but after this Mishnah, the Rebbe brought on another Mishnah that there is a machlokes, and then you say no halacha Stam. Obviously, when Rebbe wrote the Stam Mishnah, he might have wanted a pasuk like that. But the fact that he followed up with a Mishnah that has a machlokes about it shows, in fact, that he didn't want a pasuk like it. And there's a very big shaila of Stam v'achach machlokes, or vice versa, machlokes v'achach Stam. There's a machlokes when you say that applies. For instance, there are those who learn that it's only if it's in the exact same masechta. And there are those who say, no, even if it's in the same Seder, if they're both in the Seder Nezikin, that's also considered a Stam v'achach machlokes. But if it's in a different Seder, if in Seder Nezikin he says one thing, in Seder Noshim he says another thing, that would not be a raya at all. So it's for sure not a raya if it's in a different Seder, it's a machlokes Rishonim if it's in a different masechta. But I'll call upon him, Zok Reb Zreika, your question is not good, because even though you quoted the Stam Mishnah that paskins that you always need 3 months, which is not like Rabbi Yochanan, not like Rabbi Yosy, there's going to be a machlokes elsewhere. Damar Papa, B'tem Rabbi Yochanan, I mean the machlokes is by our Mishnah here, right? So we have the machlokes in our Mishnah, and you have a Stam. So this is a Stam v'achach machlokes. Damar Papa, B'tem Rabbi Yochanan, machlokes v'achach Stam, then the halacha is Stam, because that shows Rabbi made a decision after he quoted the machlokes. But Stam v'achach machlokes shows that after Rebbe was sure, now he realizes machlokes. And there's a shayla for Stam v'achach machlokes. Does that mean Rebbe's for sure paskin like the other man Omar, or does it mean it's unresolved? But I'll call upon him. Stam v'achach machlokes ain't a halacha Stam. So what is your kasha? What is your kasha, Rabbi Yirmiyah? So period. So his kasha was shloga. Mistamech v'ozel Rabavo akas v'Rab Nachum Shamei. The Rebbe Vo was an older man, and he was walking with Reb Nachum, and he was leaning on Reb Nachum, who must have been younger, to help him walk. And there's a whole shayla: are you allowed to use, even if you're a big Rebbe, are you allowed to use a Talmud Chacham in such a fashion to lean on? So there are those who learn that Rebbe Vo was the Rebbe of Reb Nachum. A Rebbe is allowed to use the Talmud that way, and there are those who learn is yes to do a regular avoida wouldn't be allowed. But here they're both walking in the same direction. So he asked if he could hold his hand a little bit to help him walk a little bit. The third shot is since we're going to see that Rab Nachum was taking advantage of Rab Vo while he was walking with him, he was actually learning Torah from Rab Vo while they're actually walking together. That would also allow Rab Vo to lean on Rab Nachum. So Mankit v'Azul halachas hilchos aminei. Rab Nachum was picking his brain, picking Rab Vo's brain, asking him halacha after halacha to get information from Rab Vo. And he asked him the following list of questions. What's the halacha? How about Stam v'achach machlokes? What about Stam de Masnis and the machlokes b'braisa? What if in the Mishnah was a Stam Mishnah, but then there's a braisa that's not that shows a machlokes? My amalei halacha Stam. The halacha will be like Stam. What about machlokes b'masnis and the Stam of b'braisa? My what will be the halacha? Amalei, and there Rebbe answered. If Rebbe took Rashi, let's see Rashi. V'chi Rebbe loishana. Rebbe sesidus a Mishnah loishana. Shetei Mishnah. Rebbe didn't quote the Stam Mishnah. So if Rebbe didn't quote the Stam Mishnah, where would Rebbe Chia have known it from? In other words, Dr. Rashi, it's impossible that something like this could have happened. Rebbe Chia tamidei minayin loy shalacha k'maisa shesasma b'braisa. Well, how would Rebbe Chia know to make a Stam Braisa if he didn't hear it from Rebbe? And since Rebbe didn't say it, I don't believe like such a thing would actually occur. Yes. Stam v'achakach machlokes. You mean how would maybe by Braisa would be even the same subject, because the Braisa by definition were written, I believe, after the Mishnayos.
Right. So, when they were written, they don't have to say that.
No, the Braisas, I'm sure the Braisas are also written in an order. They're probably also written in the order of the Shisha Sheder Mishnah. So
Right after that Mishnah in Brisa.
if it's, I guess, no, not if it's right after. A brisa by definition was written after. So let's say if it's in the same seder, in seder, not even the same mishnah. Let's say in Beya, Perak Aleph Mishnah Aleph, it says Machloikis, and then the brisa Beya Perak Aleph Mishnah Aleph would be a Stam, right? Because the brises were all directly addressing a mishnah, elaborating a little bit on what happened. But you're asking me, what if it was in a different parak or in a different masech? Would it have the same halacha? Could be, would. But at the end of the day, the shaila is not really relevant because Rabbi was saying that wouldn't have happened. Correct, but now we learned. Now you're saying you go basar Stam Mishnah. I'm going to prove to you that you don't necessarily go according to a Stam Mishnah, because we learned the Maseches Kelim. Misrek shel pishtan. If you have a comb that's designed to comb wool or flax with, it's a comb that you comb flax with. Shenitlu shinov, its teeth fell out, so therefore it lost its ability to become a comb. And the halacha is, once a keli loses its ability to do the function that it was designed for, it's no longer tamei because we consider it like a broken keli. But what happens if it's v'nishtaru bo ishtayim? There's still two teeth of the comb that remain in place. Tameos, they're still able to function in a limited capacity, but it can still function as a comb for pishton, and therefore it remains tummy. How about the achas? If there's only one tooth left, then it's tahira, because one tooth on the comb by itself cannot be used for anything. But the shenitlu achas achas, but each tooth, if it was removed from the comb and you have the tooth by itself, that's tameos. They're tummy, because they can be used either to fix a flame with, or they can be used as a clothespin to pin two things together. Shel tzemer. What if it was a comb that was designed to be used for wool, not for linen? Shenitlu shinav, whose teeth were taken out. Shenitlu shinav achas mibentayim. Every second tooth was removed, so now the teeth are further apart than they're designed. Then Torah is also Torah because it can no longer effectively comb wool. Nishtaru boy gimel b'makom echad. But if there's three teeth that are together in a row, then this comb in a limited fashion can still function as a comb for wool. What if one of the three teeth that remained was the end? You know, on a comb, all the teeth are very thin, but the end was thicker, so it doesn't really act as a proper tooth. Then, if because you need to have three regular teeth. Nitlu beis, va'asan lemilkot. What if two teeth fell out, but you use them, you fashioned them into a tweezer, tomatoes, because now they might not be a comb anymore, but they're a tweezer. How about achas v'eskinel in there? You took out one tooth and you adjusted it so that it can be used to modify a flame with. You modified it so that you can use it as a clothespin. Tamea, it will be tummy. The kaimalon, the ein halacha kosher mishnah, and we know that we don't paskin like this mishnah. So here you have an example of a stam mishnah in Kalim, and we don't paskin like it. So how could you tell me that we paskin like a stam mishnah? Here we have proof that you don't paskin like a stam mishnah. On my lay, he told him, "Barmi no deahi." Don't worry about this mishnah. So I'm just trying to think, who is the Omar lay? Who is talking to? Is this still Rab Nachim talking to Rabbi Vo? It's Rab Nachim. So Rab Nachim. Oh, so Rab Vo told Rab Nachim. Rab Vo told Rab Nachim. So Omar lay. So Rab Vo answered Rab Nachim back. You're asking me a kasha. Rab Nachim asked Rab Vo a question. You see from here that you don't go Basar Stam Mishnah. And for the Bavo, this Mishnah, normally you do go Basar Stam Mishnah, but this Mishnah is faulty. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish Tamar Tervai, both Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish agreed that do in the Mishnah. This is not a good Mishnah. How it ended up in the Mishnah, I don't know, but it doesn't belong there because it's a faulty Mishnah. And I can prove it that it's a faulty Mishnah. My time, Omar Fun Barbanech, Mishmei Derav, Mishmei Deravidi, Barei Deravika, Mishum the Kasha Rachel Asay. There's an internal stira, Mineu Bay, in this Mishnah. It says if you have the comb of a wool that's designed to comb wool and it's missing every second tooth, it's tar. which would indicate that if you have two teeth side by side, tame, that would say that the comb still retains its original function and it's tame. V'hadar tani, and then the second later, the Mishnah says nishtayu by gimel tame, gimel is time loy. So there's contradictory mashmoisin in the Mishnah. In the first part of the Mishnah, it's masha, two teeth are enough for this keli to retain its status, and in the Sefer it says you need three teeth. So it's a stira. So obviously it's a mistake. Zok Gemara, well, my kusha. That's not a kasha. That's not a stira. Dilma habagav yasa hababriyasa. Rashi has two pshatim, but the Art Scrolls picture is referring to the second pshat of Rashi, which Rashi himself says I like better. And that is there were two rows of teeth in this wool comb. The outer row was designed to do the combing, and the inner row was just designed to grab onto the wool, to hold the wool in place. And therefore, the outer one might need three, but the inner one, two is enough. So we're talking about two separate rows. So therefore, it's not a stira, although it's not clear in the Mishnah, but that's what the Mishnah means. So that Rashi Hilchos b'chitzaynos tzarich gimel b'makam echad. For the outer row, you need three in one place because that's where those are the main teeth with which you do the combing. But panemius, but the inner comb, the inner row of teeth that's just designed to hold the wool in place, die on the base, it would be enough. So that cannot be a reason why we'll disqualify this Mishnah because that's not a problem. But there's another problem with the Mishnah. In the ratio, when talking about the pishton comb, it says if you removed an individual tooth from the comb, each one is tamei by itself. Even if you didn't do anything, just removing it from the comb automatically makes it into an independent keli. It could be used now as a stick. But look at the sefer of this Mishnah. It says achas v'chskinel in there. If you took out one tooth and you modified it so that it should be able to be used for an air, meaning right out of the package, it's not royal. Right when you rip it off, it's not royal. So once again, that's a stira. Amar Bayu, my kusha, that's not a kasha either. Dilma habikatayu, habalikatai. When you break off the stick pin, did some of the comb come with it? If some of the comb came with it, now you have a little handle for your stick pin. Right? Every pin needs to have a little head to it. There it doesn't need treatment. But what if when you broke off the tooth from the comb, just the tooth came? Now you need to modify it to be able to use it for a pin. So once again, it's not a kasha. Amar Papa, umay kusha. Papa had another answer to this same question of why in one place you need to be misakin it. In the Sefer it says you need to be misakin it for it to retain its status as a keli. And in the Reisha, it's mashma that the pin by itself without any tikkun, it has a status of a keli. Because v'dilma habekat nisa habalimta. In a tiny little pin, it's a tiny little tooth. There you need to give it some handle. You need to give it something you can hold on to. But if it's a thicker, bigger type of tooth, yes, it on its own would be a keli. So that's not a steer either. So Rabbi Vo said this Mishnah is a write-off because there's a mistake in it. So far, all of the suggested mistakes were explained. It's because the people who are medayik in Mishnayos, the people who know the proper edition of the Mishnayos, they're the Bakim, they actually have some extra words added to the end of that Mishnah, which says Zu Divrei Reb Shimon, which means it's a good Mishnah, but it's not a Stam Mishnah, because it says Zu Divrei Reb Shimon, and that is the reason why Rabbi Vo said ignore that Mishnah, because that Mishnah in fact is not a Stam Mishnah. Shalach Reb Abba bar Avin sent the following halacha: Ma'arsin toich gimel. You're allowed to do erison within 3 months, right? Which is similar to what we learned in the Mishnah from Rabbi Yehuda. V'chein oisin ma'isa, and in fact, that's how we fear it. That's what happened. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says v'chein oisin ma'isa. Klei v'kachar isi minik chacham moisim. That's what I see there. V'chein oyu Rabbi Lazar melamdenu. Rabbi Lazar also taught us the same halacha. Mishum Rabbi Chanina Agadol, from the great Rabbi Chanina, and he taught us that you don't even need a full 3 months, a full 90 days. Rather, you only need ruboy shal rishon, ruboy shal shlishi, vem toy shalom. If you have 1 full month, and then you have 2 weeks of the month before and 2 weeks of the month after, so in fact you really only have just a little bit more than 2 months. That'll be good enough. There's a shaila in the Rishonim if this means any set of 60 days. Or does it have to work out in a calendar where the center is a full month and you have 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after? I guess pregnancies are impacted by the moon. I'm not sure how that would work, but there's a shayla. That's how. Zok Gemara Ameimar Shara le'ares b'yom Tishrei. He allowed Erishin, even if you had to wait 90 days, he allowed it on day 90 to do the Erishin. Amar le Rabashi la Meimar, Rabashi told the Meimar, but Rabbi Shmuel, Amar Tervayu, Rabbi and Shmuel both agree that Tzricha la'amtin gimel chadoshim chutz miyom shemesh boy, v'chutz miyom shenis arsa boy. The 90 days, you have to start counting on day 2 after the person died or divorced, and she could only be mizdavik with her next husband, not on day 90, but on day 91. Zok Gemara, that you don't count the first and last day, that has nothing to do with the shayla of the 3 months. That's relevant with the shayla of the 2 years. That was said in Menekes, but it wasn't said le'inyan getting married. So therefore, don't quote me Rav and Shmuel. And in fact, what Amemer said is correct, that muter le'aris on the 90th day. Zok to Gemara, the Rav and Shmuel, the Amrul Tavayu, Rav and Shmuel both said, Tzricha lahamtin chaftat l'chodesh chutz miyom shenoyel boy v'chutz miyom shenis arsa boy. So that's where they said their halacha. They did not say their halacha by the shayla of the hafkona of 3 months. Correct Gemara, but v'hahu the other to this erishim b'yom tishum. Once upon a time, a guy actually made the wedding on day 90, but after they Rava l'sudasik, and Rava didn't even let him make his suda at all. He said, "No, I'm sorry, the wedding is canceled." So Gemara, hahi sudas nasuin happened. That was a sudas nasuin. A sudas erishim, they're not going to be goyzer erishim of a zoyvai. But nasuin, where it can actually lead to a pregnancy, that's too dangerous. That Rava didn't allow. The hilchasa and the halach is tzricha la'amtin chaftal chodesh chutz miyom shenoyel boy v'chutz miyom shenis arsa boy. When it comes to the 24 months, it's got to be a full 24 months. 24 months. Tzricha la'amtin gimel chadoshim chutz miyom shemeis boy v'chutz miyom shenis arsa boy. And we also paskin l'chumra even when it comes to the 3 months of avchana. But of course, the place can say that nowadays that women don't nurse for 2 years. Surely the time is definitely reduced. The time is definitely reduced. But if it's a question of a marriage, will only reduce it if the first husband or somebody else puts down the funding to make sure that all of the baby formula and all of the necessary provisions for the child are in the bank. Only then would we allow her to get married within 24 months. Because even if she's not nursing, she has to have money to feed the baby. Okay, we'll stop here.